What's up guys, Phoenix here. This video is going to be another Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile video, and this time it is going to be on an updated Odd Eyes DracoPal deck list for the new August 2016 Yu-Gi-Oh! Format. The August 29th ban list has just been dropped on us, and it will go into effect on August 29th, and although it doesn't really change the card pool that we have access to for this deck in a major way, it does have major implications on how the deck can be played, because the only card that has changed is Performapal Monkey Board is now forbidden. I kind of agree with that. In fact, I 100% agree with that because the card at the end of the day is always going to be a +1 when you activate it. It is a very good scale, being a low scale of 1, as well as it's always going to be either a +1 or a 1-card scale. As I've already said, being a 1-card scale is probably the biggest aspect of it because it allows, the pendulum mechanic to be from a top decking situation into immediately winning the game, and that's something that's not really that healthy if you actually think about it. But so with Monkey Board being banned, it does change a little bit of how this deck has to be built and how it functions. But it is still very playable. I mean, hell, even when Monkey Board was still legal at 1 copy per deck, there was a YCS that was won by a person who was not playing Monkey Board due to a deck list error. He wrote a second copy of Performapal's second Donkey on his list instead of Monkey Board, and when he got a deck check, he had to swap it out and then play through Top Cut and still ended up winning that YCS. The pendulum mechanic is still incredibly strong, and it is still very capable of operating without some of its best cards in the form of Performapal Monkey Board. But ultimately, I'm just going to jump into this list and do some explanations. There are some new cards that we do have access to that we haven't had access to in the past that ultimately change a bit of how the deck can function as well. A little bit of different play strings you can perform, and so I'm just going to jump straight into it and give explanation where I think it is needed. First off, your standard staple, your Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer. You want to max on this now more than ever because you don't have just easy access into it with Monkey Board. Following that up with 1 copy of Skullcrobat Joker and 2 copies of Performapal Second Donkey. Now this card is actually just really good because it does kind of supplement the fact that we have lost Monkey Board and the fact that we only have 1 Joker in getting you searches for things. But as well as the fact that its effect triggers when it gets special summoned as well, so you can pendulum summon this and Sorcerer and search 3 cards, and that's actually something that's actually really, really strong just by organizing your chain links in the proper way of having Sorcerer as chain link 1 and Donkey as chain link 2. Your Donkey will get your search and add it to your hand before Sorcerer blows up your scales, and that's something that's really cool and really neat. But carrying on, 2 copies of Performapal Radish Horse. Now those of you that don't know what this card does, this card is essentially kind of like Gigabyte in this deck, although it is a pendulum monster. It's searchable. It's a level 4 pendulum. It's searchable off Second Donkey and Skullcrobat Joker. It just lets the deck have capability of going second a little bit more effectively, because its effect is if your opponent controls a special summon monster and controls at least as many monsters as you do, you can special summon it from your hand. So it's just a level 4 monster you can special summon. It allows you to do things like make Diamond Direwolf before you pendulum summon, and snipe problematic back row and stuff like that. Just things that the pendulum deck used to be able to do when we had things like Plush Fire and Luster in multiples that we cannot do now. That ultimately makes the Magician deck a little bit more valuable in terms of their scales, RMST and stuff like that. But this card absolutely just gives you another added layer of protection as well as play enabling in the deck because of the fact that you have this that you can use as a special summon when your opponent has possible back row that you'd want to get rid of through Diamond Dire and then Pendulum Summon, as I've already stated. But also it's a low scale, it's a 3 scale, and its scale effect is actually pretty relevant. You can combine its scale effect with Odd Eyes Unicorn to actually make some potential big attacking boards. Using Light Phoenix on your board and stuff like that, or even something like Vortex Dragon. But anyway, carrying on, rest of the Performapals: 1 Turtle, double Lizard Draw, 1 Light Phoenix, and 2 Odd Eyes Unicorn for your Skyris targets, as well as just being generic high and low scales. I still think that 2 of this is probably correct, simply because even though we only have 1 Kieran now, you can side things like Apex Avion with this deck. You can side Chaos Hunters that are something you want to get into that's high, as well as the fact that you always want to be able to Skyris for another high scale when necessary, because the deck does have an abundance of low scales, so you just kind of want to be able to get into it, even though it is worthless to pop out of your scale because it's level 1 and you almost never get it back. Needing the second one has come up a lot for me in the past, so I feel like it's definitely something to warrant playing. But carrying on, 1 Luster and triple Master for Dracoslayers, and then 1 Vector and 1 Lector for Drake Overlords for the face-off targets. Now, Vector is back in of the list. I have not been playing Vector in a long time, as well as a lot of people haven't been, but I feel like it's worth playing again now, simply because of the Metal Foes deck. If you put this in your scale, the Metal Foes deck essentially cannot play, and so there is that. That is something that is very, very valuable to you. If you're able to put up Dinoster plus Vector, you basically just lock out Metal Foes, and that's one of the big weaknesses of that deck, because this does negate the effects of all cards in your opponent's scale. So it's just something worth playing again, and at the end of the day, it is just another level 4 that you're able to pendulum summon and do stuff with. This deck kind of was running really low on level 4s after a while, and just having another face-off target just seemed like the better option to go with. to make that problem a little bit less of a problem, so to speak. But, carrying on, 3 copies of Magical Abductor. This is like the best Pendulum monster in the game, in my opinion. I love this card. It's the most important card in this deck. Resolving Terraforming Abductor is always usually just a blowout because you just get so many free cards. Now, you have a lot less that you can do with it now because you used to be able to always be able to, if you open Terraforming Abductor, you used to always be able to search a Pendulum monster and then Pendulum summon this and search an Effect Veiler, and that was due largely to Monkey Board because you'd be able to, like, Sorcerer, and you'd be able to search, like, Monkey Board plus Lizard Draw. And then you would always be guaranteed 3 cards to activate when this is on the board to search for Veiler, because you go Monkey Board, Lizard Draw, pop for Lizard Draw to draw a card, and then Monkey Board into another scale, play it, and that's 3. But you don't have that play anymore, so so that actually does change a little bit of how this card functions, but you do still have a lot of cards that can trigger this thing's effect. So it doesn't really change that much, but it's just something worth note, is that play isn't as easy as it used to be. But carrying on, 2 copies of Guiding Ariadne. I am playing the Counter Trap build. I was wrestling between 2 and 3 of this for a while, but ultimately I just settled on 2 being the number because the deck does have a lot of low scales, and ultimately I just wanted the space for other things to be like engine enablers and stuff like that. I haven't really had a problem seeing this card at 2, especially with like Abductor plays and stuff like that, and it shouldn't be like the main focus of the deck to warrant playing 3 of this. It just takes up too much space. But anyway, the 1 copy of Kieran that we're still allowed to play, you can search this card off Magical Abductor, so like it really didn't change a lot. Like, this deck really only ever played 2 in the main deck anyway, in most of the builds that I've been playing and most of the builds that I've been seeing. So losing 1 doesn't really do much. You never really played Bamuku in this deck, but you could easily put a Bamuku in, even though that does take up your normal summon if you're trying to Pendulum summon this, so there is that as well as another factor. But ultimately, I mean, this card is still just a low scale, so it's worth it to play. And if you draw it or search it off Abductor, then it is just equally as good as it's always been. It's very easy to access the card in any hand where you have, an Abductor play that's live. So there's that. And then the last monster in the deck is 1 copy of Archfiend Eccentric. This card is just generic back row and monster removal. Just out some problematic things, so I felt like it was worth it to include because you can search it off Abductor in certain ways that you would need it, as well as the fact that when you do like your first turn play, you usually end up making Magister, and if you have, a proper scale or something, set up to where, like, if you have Skyris active, so you're getting a scale next turn anyway, you can just search this off your Magister in the end phase, thus meaning that you can out back row, out problematic back rows and things like that. But that is all the monsters in the deck. For the spells, 2 copies of Skyris and then 3 copies of Terraforming. This is just what I found to be the best ratio, simply because if you have multiple Terraformings, you can always set them and pop them for Sorcerer. Whereas if you have multiple Sky Irises, like, you have to pop that with Sorcerer and then play the other one. It just has a lot less value. And also, like, Terraforming is the card you definitely want to open before Sky Iris, because you want to open Terraforming Abductor. You don't want to open Sky Iris Abductor because that makes it a lot more restricting on what your play lines are capable of performing. Opening Terraforming Abductor versus Sky Iris Abductor, you'd be surprised at just how much of a different beast it is when you're dealing with it. But carrying on, 2 copies of Painful Decision just to get access to the Master quickly. Painful Decision just gives you extra cards because of your Dinosaur plays. You're always going to be able to recover that Master. So it's absolutely just a huge inclusion to be in the deck, like just being able to do this. As well as you could also include things like Flash Knight in the deck if you wanted to. If you wanted to like cut a Unicorn out of the deck and maybe cut one of the Radish Horses, you could play something like Flash Knight, and that would allow you to have a high scale. You could search off this as well. But that's just something that I tested and I just didn't feel like it was worth it. But anyway, 1 copy of Draco Face-Off, because it's basically staple, and then 1 Odd Eyes Fusion to search off of Sky Iris to be the 4th Sky Iris target. Now this card, I have a really love-hate relationship with this card. I almost just want to side the card, because if you're going first, the card is almost always dead, because you typically just have this in the deck so you can start your turn with it going second, and like that just makes your plays really strong. But ultimately, it just seems worth the main just because you can go second. You can lose die rolls. So there's that. But for the Ariadne targets, there's only 4 of them. 1 Warning, 2 Solemn Strike, and 1 Scolding. This is the ratio that I like best. It's the best performing ratio for me, because off the first time you reveal with Ariadne, you typically show your opponent these 3, and then your opponent's never going to give you the Warning, and they'll always either give you Scolding or Strike. And then depending on which one they give you, it doesn't matter, because then off the next reveal, you just reveal the extra Strike as well. So off the first reveal, if they give you the Scolding, then your next reveal will be Strike, Strike, Warning. Off the first reveal, if they give you Strike, then your next reveal is going to be Strike, Strike, Scolding. And it's always equally as good. Like, Scolding is just an amazing card because it does have a really high cost, but it literally is the most thorough of the Solemns in the game because it negates anything. And that's something that is very valuable in certain matchups and certain spaces of time. Now, you could easily just play 3 strikes, but I just feel like Scolding is just, better allocated to that 4th slot, especially since, the way you reveal it in that order, you could end up with double strike anyway. So it just doesn't seem worth it. Like, if you're going to play 3 strike to 4 strike, like, you could just play Scolding because your opponent's either going to give you the Scolding or they're going to give you the strike. they're almost never going to give you warning because that card's just way too good. But for the extra deck, 1 copy of Ignister because it's at 1. Be careful with how you summon it. 2 copies of Dynastor. I've been wanting to up this to 3 actually, but I just couldn't find like room. Maybe siding a 3rd for the games that like I side out Odd Eyes Fusion. But 1 copy of Magister and then the Titanic Galaxy to just rope out this whole little Dracoslayer engine. For the Odd Eyes Fusion package, 1 copy of Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, 1 Odd Eyes Rebellion Dragon, and then 1 Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. Playing the Synchro over Absolute because it actually does come up because, you can side Veilers in this deck and you can combine it with Kieran to make this and like just have a very good situation going for you. If that's the play that needed to be made. Then Utopia the Lightning for that little package. There's so many little packages in this extra deck. Like this extra deck legitimately is only 5 cards after you put in everything that's basically mandatory to play. You have to play these cards to get over Cosmos ships like Dark Destroyer and Forerunner and stuff like that because it's your second out other than Ignister. If Ignister was still at 2 copies or higher, then you probably would never touch these cards because you would just make Ignister. But we have to play these because Ignister is at 1 because that card is also broken. But then for the other just generic Exceeds, 1 copy of Giant Hand, 1 Castel, 1 Diamond Dire. Like I said, you can do Radish Horse plays to make Diamond Dire before you Pendulum Summon and snipe back row, and that's actually something that's really cool and really good. 1 Daigusto Emerald to reset resources, and then 1 copy of Abyss Dweller for the Mermail and like just basically blanket matchups actually. Against Mermail, PK Fire, and Cosmos, this card's just equally good if you're able to like ram over boards and stuff. So there is that, but ultimately, that is my current take on the DracoPal deck list for the August 29th format. It looks pretty standard on paper, but just know that there are some added play lines that you have access to in the deck due to the addition of cards like Radish Horse and stuff like that. Your go-to low scale, being Monkey Board, is gone, so that does change a good bit because that means that you're gonna be very unlikely to Pendulum Summon your level 3s that are in your extra deck outside of putting something like Kieran or Sorcerer in your scale because those have scale numbers of 2. So you have to keep that in mind as you're playing the deck. Basically, not a lot changed, but just a good bit of how the deck actually plays changes. Now, if we ever get a Skyris target that's like a level or a Pendulum scale of 1, like if we ever get Odd Eyes Persona Dragon, which I think that is a scale 1, that's from the manga, then that would probably definitely replace Odd Eyes Light Phoenix because then it would be a Skyris target that is a scale 1. Because we did get Mirage Dragon, but we didn't get Persona Dragon, which I find very weird. I feel like we should have gotten those at the same time, per se, but I mean, hey. Whatever Konami wants to do is whatever Konami wants to do. If we get it later as a manga promo, then that's absolutely fine, because that just means that we get it eventually, and then that does allow a little bit more of the play strings that this deck provides. Because, like, Light Phoenix being a Performapal name as well doesn't really matter as much as anymore because we don't have Monkey Board and we don't have things like that. We're not going to be readily accessing the card as a Performapal any more than we're going to be accessing it as an Odd Eyes monster. So Odd Eyes Persona Dragon being a 1 scale would just be obviously better. But that's just my own personal opinion on the matter. But anyway, as always, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the nonsense you usually do. Links are in the description to my Facebook, Twitch, and background music playlists. Let me know what you guys think about the deck list, if there's any changes you think you would make, all that sort of nonsense, what you think about the deck in general, all of that. I'm curious as to all of your opinions regarding this thing. I think the Pendulums are still a very, very strong contender for the new format. Monkey Board being gone doesn't really change that much. It just changes like how your low scale has to be played, but that's really all that it really does for you. It doesn't do nearly as much as what people were hoping it would do, which is kill the Performapal deck. No, this deck is still very much very good, and I would like to know what you guys' opinion on this deck as well as the Pendulum mechanic are in the comments down below. But other than that, as usual, thanks for watching, and as always, guys, take care.